How's it going, guys? Episode number 12, True Health. Mixing it up a little bit. We're doing a live Q&A. So I feel like we're in a parallel universe because you could be listening live. You could listen to yourself tomorrow or at least hear your question. So if you're joining me on Facebook right now, chime in with a question here over in the chat bar. Hit me up with anything. I've got a bunch of random topics that I'm going to go over today. But yeah, I just wanted to address some questions that we've had in the past. So I'm more than happy to interrupt the regular scheduled programming, which I'm going to start with a review, just a quick review, some highlights from a really, really good read for the Facebook Live people, The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. This is the 10th anniversary, so he's kind of got little addendums after every chapter. I think every practitioner, whether you're conservative management or not, this should be your required reading, mainly because it's based on newer research and newer kind of revelations in the field of like cellular biology. Bruce Lipton was a cellular biology and histology teacher in Stanford for a while, med school, I believe another school up northeast. Interesting book. But I just want to go over some highlights, and I got a couple other topics, so please chime in with a question if I can answer it. More than happy to do so. So the first thing that again, I'm just going to run through the quotes. So a lot of you have heard of this Gaia Hypothesis. Some of this stuff is woo, but you got to realize that almost every quote that I pull out of here has some research behind it, or at least some papers behind it, so it's interesting stuff. Pick up the book. I'll put a link to the book. I'm not going to put a link to all the research articles because they're cited in the book. But James Lovelock came up with the Gaia Hypothesis, which basically is saying the Earth is a superorganism. It is not saying that I think this notion of Gaia has gotten taken out of context, where we think that the Earth is a spiritual being, and that's what Gaia means, and treat the Earth appropriately because she's Mother Earth. Some people maybe that's what James Lovelock meant, I don't know. But when you look at the research behind it, more so what he's saying is the Earth is dependent on the organisms that live on it, all the way down to the single-celled organisms, all the way up to the most complex, probably Homo sapiens. Just like our body is dependent on 72-ish different, or 72 trillion different cells, but then the hundreds of millions of different nematodes and parasites and worms and all those things that we have a symbiotic relationship with. And that Gaia Hypothesis is looking at the symbiosis of the Earth, and how even if you went back into some biblical texts looking at how we hold dominion over, the land and the animals, however you want to look at that, but we're literally terraforming the Earth for better or good. So we have a massive effect, but so do all the animals. I mean, if you look at the difference between when we knocked out like herds of bison, we're in the midst, another thing that they talk about in the book is that we're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction of the world. We've had 5 so far. What's causing that? Humans. Since I think I brought this up on another episode, I just think this stuff's super interesting. That's what these solo podcasts are going to be, is kind of just a lot of my random thoughts. But we're in the midst of this 6th mass extinction due to humans, and basically us overrunning other habitats or hunting animals to depletion. What's scary is, from a study in 1970 that took a census on all the species of the world, we've seen a 2/3 decline in species overall. We've lost 2/3 of all the species of animals in the world already. So a lot of people would say we're past that tipping point. This isn't meant to be a doomsday talk. What I'm trying to say is, first of all, you have to take into account that we probably haven't found a lot of species in areas like deep sea, the jungle. The more we're able to see different parts of the world, deep core ice study, things like that, we're picking up more species. But to lose 2/3 of the animal life on Earth, not to mention the plant life that has been wiped out, or strain species that have been pushed to the edge of extinction due to human cultural advancement, which you can look at it a lot of different ways, right? Are we meant to just take all the resources of the earth and then the next step of evolution is something else? I don't know. But basically, just a thought that we are in a symbiotic relationship with the earth if we want to stay here for a while longer, quite a while longer. I know in my lifetime, I think it's that perspective of I'm within my lifetime, it's probably not going to happen, so I don't have to care that much. But can you imagine if it does get to a tipping point and now, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, they're living in that era where they do have to worry daily, like, man, I can't eat anything because everything's, so polluted. I can't eat a fish out of the water without maybe having to test everything, or we've crossbred everything to the point where, foods that never made us sick are making it, I don't know, whatever it is. But we don't live in that time right now. We see things changing. Some people debate that change, which I think is just insane because when you have, I think, a 95% consensus from the scientific world that climate changing is occurring, you may want to do something about it. You may say, well, what the hell does this have to do with health? Everything. Healthy world, healthy you. If you have a screwed up environment, shitty food sources, and then all of that catalyzes other effects with changing weather and whatever it is, well, the ramifications are gonna be felt, whether that's just increased stress in your life due to the environment, or the actual environment is actually making you unhealthy, much like the air quality in Japan and China, much like food sources in the U.S. We don't have the micronutrient density in our food supply, so we see that a lot of people are micronutrient deplete. So these things aren't necessarily acute in all areas of the world. Some are. We're lucky in the U.S. we don't see these ramifications, or we have a little bit better shielding from it. Some other things, just a quote from Irv Koenigsberg. When cultured cells are ailing, you first look to the cell's environment, not the cell itself or the cause. I put up a quote like this not too long ago. What's up, Lisa? Thanks for joining me. If you think about humans and what I just said, and paying attention to our environment, that does mean I'm always talking about levels. And if you checked out my last blog, which I'll put a link up to, I talked about how all the way down from like how cells communicate to how humans are now using digital and electronic communication, and in particular social media, to almost mirror the ability for quantum level communication between cells, and how we're now mimicking that in our era. Well, that gives us a greater ability, for better or worse, to affect our environment. And what I mean by that is the more that humans act like one single organism or one superorganism, we have a bigger mass effect. Well, at the same time, the things that we're using to communicate are changing our environment via EMF, and this is not woo stuff. Tons of studies all dating back to 1976 on electromagnetic frequencies and how they alter, basically brainwave states between like beta and theta and delta waves, concentration, like all these things. And then there's, of course, everybody knows the funny quote of, ooh, you don't want to live under the power lines. Like that's where, you would see no knock on anybody, but where you're going to see a mobile home and maybe Cousin Eddie living. But you do see higher rates of cancer and autoimmune disease and stress-related changes such as hypercholesterolemia and high blood pressure for people that live around these, either a power plant, a transformer under high-voltage power lines. But you also got to think those are quite often not actually right down the road, or very nice areas that are, it's nice, higher socioeconomic area, but usually those are lower socioeconomic areas. So that may just be more correlation of the other factors in that area based on where they're building the homes or mobile homes or trailer parks around these areas. And then we're just getting a cross correlation, and it's not a direct causal issue. So my next quote was talking about a study from Song from 1989, talking about the EMF study. This is one of the bigger studies that actually brought up the term radiesthesia. The thought that the plethora of electromagnetic and other electronic frequencies roaming around, radio frequencies, cell phones, TV, whatever it is, flying around us at all times, is actually dampening our ability to have maybe not necessarily, I'm not saying ESP or definitely not ESPN, but not extra sensory perception. But the fact that, still today, most native Aborigines can be stuck in a dark room and point north, south, east, west. They just have that kind of skill built in. Now, we've talked about this before, bits of magnetite that are still present in the sphenoid bone of everybody. It's just, if you don't use it, you lose it. And we've just lost these abilities, but also, how are these EMF fields affecting our health and affecting these abilities that we used to have? I'm part Native American, so I think it's interesting thinking that I can sense some animal I could track down, whether that was just, habitual training, or did Native Americans, were they a little more in tune? I don't know, because I didn't live back then, thank God. Another one, 5% of cancer and cardiovascular disease are directly related to genetics. Now, what's that matter? Well, we're living in the area where we're in this, the thought process of my health, which is changing, that my health is predicated or predominated by my genetic structure, my genetic makeup. So it's kind of this fatalist view of, I got these genes, here we go. Well, that's what this book is all about, is no, that's not how it works at all. Could you be set up to have to work harder in certain areas of your life to offset issues? Sure. But the whole field of epigenetics, and the more we're understanding about it and learning, and I say they, the researchers, are learning about it, the more we realize it's not that you're dealt this deck of cards, it's more like you're dealt 52 blank cards. It's just the fact that you were dealt cards. The cards are your genes. You weren't dealt, I don't know, I have no good analogy, that you weren't dealt 52 dice, and now you just have to roll the dice every day. That you literally get to write what each one of those cards is based on environment, emotional, stress response, relationships, activity, exercise, thoughts, nutrition, all that stuff is going to basically help manifest genes better or worse. I'm going to get to your question in a second, Casey, just because I'm not talking. I'm going to finish the book review, and then we'll get into running if we have time. This thought of the cell membrane, and Bruce Lipton highlights this as the membrane, MEMBRAIN instead of BRANE. Talking about the membrane as the brain of the cell versus what we used to think was the nucleus, but they've shown that if you remove the nucleus from the cell, it still basically can avoid danger or predator. It can still seek out food, and it can still replicate. It's just kind of an interesting way to think of it. He also used the fact that the receptor IMPs, which are membrane proteins, are the sense organ of a cell. They can read vibrational energy such as light, sound, radio frequencies. And I think when we say things like that something's reading vibrations, people go like, what the hell are you talking about? Is this like a Beach Boys song, or what are we doing? Well, all of those are vibrations, right? These are spectral vibrations. You talk about ultraviolet light, infrared. These are all different frequencies. These are vibrational or wave patterns that we're perceiving all the time. Some that are known to us if they're a high-end, like sound, right? Some that aren't, right? That would be like ultrasonic frequencies or sonar or anything like that. Different wavelengths of light. Bruce Lipton was one of the first people to basically define the cell membrane as, let me see if I can find it here. I don't want to burn up too much time looking for it. A liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And at the time, it's a good correlate in this book, and you can read the book to explore all this stuff, but that's also how you would explain a computer microchip. The exact same thing, and they have actually shown that you can program cells via electronic programming. Some other stuff, the membranes receptors are the equivalent of sensory nerves, and the effector proteins are the equivalent of action-generating motor nerves. So we need to start thinking of cellular biology as the cells as small, fully functioning entities, and if we allow them to thrive in an environment, not just the cellular matrix that they're surrounded by, but their gross environment, which again, I think of it just like if you were looking at a microscope, right? You zoom in 400 times to see the cell. If I zoom all the way out and I could go up to a satellite and I saw the whole Earth, all of those are extrapolations of our environment. We need to be working on all of them. Let's see what else we have. Just some interesting stuff just a thought that I didn't ever have before, really. The illusion of matter. He kind of just brings up, like, this microphone is on a desk right here. If we took an electron microscope and zoomed all the way into the quantum level, there'd be nothing here, right? Because it's a bunch of basically quantum particles just moving around, interacting with each other. So there's not actually matter, which when you think about that, it may change. I know it does in my field. It changes how you look at things because, again, you got to understand that you're dealing with frequency, vibration, and all that stuff. And you may be like, oh, my God, what is he talking about? Like, this guy's just going off the handle. Well, think about why we use vibration plates. Think about why maybe a stainless steel Graston tool works better than a jade or bone one, because they vibrate differently. Think about PEMF treatment, ultrasound treatment, all of these things. You got to think you're using frequencies, MRI, imaging modalities. You're using frequencies to, communicate with the body and ultimately change the body. The thought of harmonic resonance versus destructive interference. And the good kind of image that he brought up was if you threw two pebbles into a pond at the exact same time, as the waves converge, they actually build a bigger wave. If you throw those pebbles a little bit off of one another, the waves basically counteract. All that's saying is, in our everyday lives, if we're gonna if you want to think about energy, whatever you send out, do you want to amplify others' positivity, or do you want to squash their positivity with negativity? Do you want to speak to a patient in a way that's going to be productive or counterproductive? Do you want to be happy in your life? Maybe you should put out some of the stuff you want versus expecting just to get all the good stuff and not put it out in the first place. I think that's all it boils down to. Let's see. The conscious mind is in control only about 5% of the time. This comes from a study from Mazak from 2005. Super interesting. The conscious mind is in control only 5% of the time. So our subconscious patterns, our subconscious just kind of that default mode is just doing everything. And, he's the example of driving a car. How many times have you had a conversation and then you kind of, about 15 minutes, you're like, holy hell, who was driving that car? The car example I like because it's not a determinist view or a fatalistic view of subconscious control. I think when you tell people my subconscious is in control, it's really hard to change. You look at the Jesuit saying of give me a boy until the age of 7 and I'll tell you what kind of man he's going to be. Well, no, it's not that you're predetermining everything and it's set in stone. If you didn't learn to drive a car until you're in 16, unless you lived on a farm like I did. You didn't learn to drive a car until you're 16, but just the repetition of the pattern built a subconscious pattern. That's what we say in the rehab world all the time, right? We have to give enough reps, enough periodization, enough graded exposure to create a new pattern and eventually create a subconscious pattern. Breathing's a good example. And boom, bow, ba. That's my magic. That's boom, ba, bow. I don't know what I do with that. You have a different pattern, and now we haven't necessarily fixed anything. We just changed. We created a variable, right? A quote, I think this was his original quote, success doesn't bring happiness, happiness brings success. Yeah. Between 75 and 90% of primary care physician visits are stress-related. You think about that, you're like, yeah, I know that. 75 to 90, even your colds, your viruses, because when we're stressed, we know we knock down our immune system, we're a little immune suppressed. But the more you think about that, you start thinking, man, if I can control stress better, I can be healthy overall, which everybody knows, but we think of stress as this singular thing, and I deal with stress, and stress itself is bad, but we don't think about how stress is affecting other stuff necessarily. He defined evolution as the expansion of awareness. I just kind of like that. And then just finishing up with a quote that he threw in there from Einstein. Know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Again, you get into quantum physics and they talk about the multiverse theory and how there are probably, millions of possibilities all happening once, whether you believe that or not. I don't know if it's even a belief system or if, that's a theory, obviously. But when you think about that, and I was listening to another interview this morning, I can't remember, David Epstein maybe, and he was basically saying how we know we need to live in the present. All the Eckhart Tolle has written about this. Multiple people have talked about this. But he's like, when you try to manifest the future, which are your thoughts, like, I got to get this done. Oh, shoot, I can't pay that bill. I got to do this. You're literally trying to write a story that doesn't yet exist. So at least make sure it's a good one, right? Okay. So let's answer Casey's question real quick. So he said, so really switching gears here. No segue. Running question. My 9-year-old tends to get a stitch in his side when running, even though he has a good endurance base. What causes that? Nobody knows. It's the truth. The theories. The number one theory, and one that I would agree with, is, let's see, make sure we got nothing else, is that when we take off to run, most of the time, we've talked about how a lot of people nowadays are running around with non-optimal breathing. We tend to sit a lot, which means we have depressed function of the diaphragm, and not from like a strength standpoint. If we could do a deep needle EMG on the diaphragm, which would suck, we would see that it's firing correctly. You may just not get as good of excursion, which means the diaphragm may not move down as well because it's literally like a little stiff, and so is your rib cage, and my organs haven't been pumped like they have in a while, or should have in a while, because it doesn't move. So when we take off to run, your diaphragm is basically trying to like loosen up. Well, all of a sudden, when I start to need more O2, right, as I get a little bit dogged, because side stitch usually doesn't occur right away, and now I really need my diaphragm to kick in to help get that lower lobe of the lung to kind of perfuse or fill up with blood a little bit. What we're thinking is that it's almost like a cramp. If you've ever had like a cramp in your foot when you're stretching like your quad, right, it doesn't make sense. It's almost like it's going into a mini spasm because it's all hands on deck. Like, I got to get it to work. And of course, the anatomical differences right and left of your diaphragm and the connections to the liver. I don't know I knew the stat at one time. It's in the article I wrote for Trail Runner magazine. I think it's 97 or 96% of side stitch occurs on the right side, even in left-handed individuals. Probably because your liver. I know that's different for some people. So that's the prevailing thought. I know you get into like PRI. Some people just say it is the anatomical difference overall, or the structural asymmetry. I don't think anybody really knows, but that spasm effect, depending on what you're feeling, kind of makes sense to me. So that's what I usually tell people. People used to say it was correlated to dehydration and stuff. I don't believe that whatsoever. Some people say it is correlated to an inflamed or dysfunctional liver. I don't believe that, and your son's probably an example, because not many 9-year-olds probably have liver problems. Hopefully not. So that's my short answer to that, Casey. I hope that helps. What else we got here? Just some interesting stats. So I was kind of poking around and poking and prodding, trying to find out, as I always am, why is the medical system failing so poorly? And why are all these alternative medical options being sought out, which I think is great. When you look back at Native American tribes, the largest Native American tribes that ever existed were the Cherokee. Is still the largest gross tribe. There's disseminations within tribes of different parts of the Cherokee Nation. But when you look at even a large tribe, even if there were multiple tribes within a larger tribe, like your tribe was kind of subset based on your patriarch, which most tribal Native American nations were patriarchal versus matriarchal. And that patriarch was usually a shaman or kind of a medicine man. Some of them had a chief, some of them had a dualistic system where the spiritual side was different than the leadership side, but a lot were led by a shaman. You usually had around 50 people, 50 to 60 to one medicine man. Versus you get into today's numbers, it's less than one doctor. This is in America, less than one doctor per 1,000 people, right? So now we have all these people that are, America is one of the most unhealthy nations in the world, and we have all these super unhealthy people with these high-level cases that are harder to figure out because, the drugs that we've been using for years are starting to be less effective. They weren't that effective at all in the beginning. And now we're overrunning our doctors, so no wonder these people are underpaid, overworked. There's a high suicide rate in the medical community. So first, it's not like you can just pump out more doctors, right? These medical schools are just overrun. They can't take any more people in. So I think what we need to realize is that, and this is where you get into what a lot of people are already doing. So you look at the Functional Medicine Institute, people like Chris Kresser and the Kresser Institute, Ben Greenfield just started Key on You. You're seeing this role of kind of a health coach or a health consultant come to play, and we've talked about this a little bit. But I think you need, we know in the medical world that, and I know this is different state by state, but your medical doctor kind of presides at the top, and then you're going to have kind of your MD, DO at the very top, and then you're going to kind of have nurse practitioner and physician assistant. Some states, those are primary care. Most states, they have to work under the purview of an MD. And then below that, you'd have nurse, and then wherever those people think that people like myself fit in, chiros, PTs, whatever it is. But now you're seeing this big commingling of this stuff. I think what people deserve, and this is the product or the company that we're trying to create called Anthro Health, that people deserve all three tiers of that all at once, not that they're utilizing all three people every time. So what I mean by that, I think everybody should have kind of a top tier MD, should have a mid-level, like, whether that's chiro, PT, nutritionist, whatever, and then a lower level, somebody that's maybe not credentialed, but it's their contact point, and they're constantly be able to communicate with them, and maybe there are some people that know enough that can act in all three of those realms, but I that's what we're kind of trying to build. I just think we need not more medicine men or shaman per tribe, but we need a lot more people that are a lot more educated out there to help the gen pop sift through the amount of information, but also their individual medical maladies. Let's see what Lisa said. When you injure your back, what's the best at-home treatment? Holy cow, that's a broad question. I'm guessing you're talking low back. I don't know if you hurt your back, Lisa. I hope not. This is like a mirror, so yeah. So first thing that we used to do, or we were always coached on back in the day, I don't know when the day was, depending on when you were born, we are always told to ice, heat, rest. We know from research, rest is the worst thing you can do for low back pain in particular. Let's see if she commented on here. Yes, low back. And I have to give this kind of disclaimer answer. I don't provide medical advice via these whatsoever. This is just kind of what I would do if I was me. But you also got to realize this is why I'm always saying, like, everybody deserves a top level exam to say, how do you treat low back pain? It's super tough. A mentor colleague of mine, Dr. Philip Snell, runs an entire course called Fix Your Own Back, where he teaches clinicians and lay public how to take care of their own back, or teach people how to take care of their own back. That's a 2-day, 8 hours each day course, where he goes through everything from McKinsey movements to breathing, bracing, loading patterns, the psychology, the pain neuroscience, all that stuff behind it. But the first thing is you need to get moving. So we need you to move however you can, as long as you're not going into pain. Now, when I say that, and the funny thing is, most people think, I rest, I took my ibuprofen, I heat ice maybe a day or two. The first thing they tend to go to is stretching. So we see a lot of people like doing like toe touches and all these things. Usually you are flexion intolerant when you hurt your back. It means it hurts to bend forward. So the last thing we want to do is be going through repeated flexion of my lumbar spine and putting stress on the sciatic nerve if you're having especially symptoms down the back of your legs. So we'll usually have people start with extension-based movements, either hanging out in like a sphinx where they're on their belly, propped up on their arms. And this is very generalized, so all my clinicians don't hate on me. I'm just telling you what the stats would say. And then we do like active cobras, pressing up off the floor. Then I get somebody into like a dead bug position where my legs are up in a 90-degree position. I'm laying on my back. We'd work on breathing, work on a little low-level bracing. Then we may flip them over and have them do some hard-style planks, again, concentrating on breathing and bracing strategy. Then we get back into loading them up from the top down, teaching them how to get in and out of a chair, using a really good hip hinge, again, with that bracing strategy in place. And that's how we take them basically from, creating awareness around the area that hurts, reducing pain, creating better motor control through the hips so we offload that area. And then at the end, it's all graded exposure, so we need to go home and do more of those extensions and more hip hinges. And that would be my general answer. I hope that helps. That's a tough one to answer, to be honest, at least in that amount of time. What else we got? Again, these are just my musings. I think it's really interesting that we have an entire TV station, HGTV, Home and Garden TV. I think that's what it stands for. Yeah. That's all about renovating houses. And there's numerous shows. I like Chip and Joanna as much as everybody. The people I don't like, and I don't even know their name, is the guy with the beard and the lady with blonde hair. I just don't like them. They're knockoffs. I don't like them. Whatever their names are, if you know their names, put them on here so I can say who they are. They're probably really nice people, though. We have this entire channel dedicated to renovating houses, things that are continually breaking down. We spend a lot of money on, and we think that's our end-all, be-all, our dream home, right? We're so happy with our dream home. Let's talk about homes first, and then I'll get into the human side of this. I would like to see a show on HGTV. And HGTV, if you want me to do this for you, you get a hold of me. I think they should have building biologists on HGTV or a show about it, talking about how to make a healthy home, right? We talk about, we want the home to be functional. How about a healthy home, right? Free of all this EMF crap, making sure we're not using building materials that are off-gassing crap, making sure the lighting is appropriate, making sure the water is appropriate. All these things, right? Making it kind of easier to grow things indoors, whatever it is. I would like to see that show. Now, the second part of this is, why isn't there an entire channel dedicated to the renovation of human health? There's a lot more humans than there are houses. Well, maybe not. I don't know that stat. I won't say that. I would venture to say there are more humans than houses in the world. That may not be right. But either way, I would hope that everybody agrees, maybe not old guy on the chair behind the desk in the Oval Office right now, but humans are far more important than a house. So why don't we have a channel that's dedicated to the renovation of human health? Health? Did I just say health? I just think that should happen. We got a lot of smart people out there that could be helping a lot of people. Hopefully, if there is ever a TV station like that, whether it's on something like Facebook or on Real TV, that it's actually good information, that they get a good group of people to vet whoever's on there and what's being said. Because I can tell you right now, Dr. Oz is not telling you the best crap out there. The show The Doctors is not telling you what's correct. They're just telling you just like clickbait on the internet, the thing that's going to get people to watch. Well, how about we put a show out that actually talks about what's correct? And if it does help people, it's like Field of Dreams, if you help them, they will keep coming back to watch. I think that's what Kevin Costner heard for sure. Okay, what else we got? Just random thoughts. So I did get a question quite a while ago via Instagram about how do you heal or help shoulder bursitis tendinitis recovery, or whatever the question was. How do you help shoulder bursitis tendinitis? This is kind of like Lisa's question with low back pain. First of all, you actually need to know what's going on, what could be contributing to continued pain in your shoulder, whether it's your mechanics, what you're doing, systemic, inflammation, does your diet suck, past injury, beliefs, I don't know. But what we do know is most people could do better with how they load their shoulders, right? So actual technique. And then the type of loads we're incorporating into our everyday stuff, whether that's through just workouts or what we're doing at work or in the home. So usually when we're looking at tendinitis, bursitis, we know that we need to increase the resiliency of a tissue. So all that means is I need that tissue to be able to withstand more load more often. But that's also the way we get hurt, is we usually do too much too often, and now we end up with, if it is truly tendinosis, tendinitis, that's what probably got us there. Without the comorbidities or the inclusion of things like medication interference like Accutane or Cipro or anything like that would throw us for a loop. But low-level loads, and one of the best kind of loads you can use to help with tendon repair or resiliency or just pain override would be isometric loads. So there is research that the window of time of 45 seconds to a minute of isometric loads, what an isometric load is, guys, if I flex my bicep, look at that gun. If I flex my bicep and I hold it in a static position, so I'm not changing the lever of my arm, and I hold that, that's an isometric contraction. Isometrics have been shown to create analgesia, aka pain relief, when we hold that contraction or that tension, doesn't have to be 100% either, for 45 seconds to a minute. If you go over 2 minutes, it has been shown to have negative effects, that you actually strain probably the motor neuron pool too much, and you put yourself back into that too much too soon scenario. So, good way to do it. Get some moderate weight in a non-painful position and start to load. Say you got a shoulder problem, a really good one that we use all the time that's pretty safe, a bottoms-up kettlebell carry, or just hold. So you get that kettlebell, balance it, something you can handle, squeeze the handle. And we like to use the reflexive nature of grip and how that turns on the muscles of the rotator cuff. I can hear it raining right now, and I'm going to sacrifice for you guys, which is the third time I've done it this week. I think my windows are cracked. It's all good. It's all good. The inside of the car is getting washed this week, tell you what. But bottoms up kettlebell carry, we just get that weight, and we want to carry for around 45 seconds to a minute, right? So something you can manage for that. It's a great way to work on grip strength, but like we said, the reflexive nature of how your grip reflexively turns on your rotator cuff, really cool thing to work on there. What else we got? Let's see what Jared said. Because you and I would tell people to get to work, and most people that watch TV just want a healthy pill. That's true, but so Jared said on the HGTV, what could we use HGTV, the same acronym? So health, and I don't know, healthy. All I can think of is like Healthy Gut TV. That's too specific. If you got a good name, throw your healthy HGTV acronyms at me. I would say that a lot of people think of all the documentaries that are on Netflix now, whether they're legit or not, on food and diet and health, and the harm of the pharmaceutical companies and big pharma. I think Jared had another comment. But I think people are seeking out this stuff now. Otherwise, these documentaries would not be continuing to be made. So I think if you made a channel that actually has good information on it, with obviously good personalities, people that can deliver this stuff well, the first step is getting the good information to people, and obviously the action lies with the person themselves. But I think the big thing, like we said numerous times, are people are confused on what information's good, so it puts them in the position where they can say that their lack of action is based on they don't know what to do because they don't know what's right, which at the end of the day, just get off your ass and do something. All right, something's better than nothing. Some people get themselves in trouble with too much of some crap, but that's okay. That's better than nothing, right? And you cannot feel guilty or bad for not knowing that something wasn't as great as it could be, right? So if you're like, dude, I did a couch 5K and I just ran 30 miles my first week. Okay, did you not think that was a bad idea and that you thought you'd get hurt? No, I didn't know. Okay, now you do. So we're not going to do that again. We're going to get you back out there. Yeah, I do agree, Jared, but I also think that times are changing. Like I said, the medical model is kind of creating a marketplace that's hungry for information, and people are more into self-action, and yeah, just hopefully it keeps changing that way. Lisa, we need to expose how all the chemicals and products in food is destroying. All the chemicals and products and food is destroying. I'm guessing you're saying how all the chemicals are destroying our food, like the nutrient density, which I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. That is absolutely true, but what we have to realize, it's the chemicals aren't affecting the food necessarily. The chemicals are affecting the soil that the food is grown in, which takes us back to the point of the quote, when cultured cells are ailing, you first look to the cell's environment, not to the cell itself or the cause. And that was Irv Koenigsberg. All food is destroying our bodies. Yeah. So you got to think, the soil is the environment that the food is grown in. The food is then what fosters our internal environment. The soil is ultimately at the whim or the will of the people who have to tend that soil, humans. But the interesting thing is now you're starting to see shifts in food even outside of the typical agrarian culture of America. So even plants are starting to change in forests and in jungles just based on particulate matter that is in the environment. So again, I don't care what your stance is on things like climate change and stuff like. If you think climate change is not real, then I also hope that you truly do believe in Santa and the Easter Bunny. Because that you live a magical life, and God bless you. But this stuff's real. That's why you have people working on technologies to draw carbon out of the environment, to draw plastic out of the ocean. So yeah, Lisa, we do need to let people know, but we need to, again, that's where the education component comes in. So we need to get people, what I would actually like to change is people get really hung up on this like GMO thing and that, don't eat your gluten in your food. I tell you what, you could eat anything that was grown, raised, that, lived and breathed and was killed to eat via the earth if its environment was like it was supposed to be. It was raised in its natural environment, whether that's tended by a human or not. It's the fact that we tend to, again, terraform or try to genetically modify. And I know I just said the non-GMO thing, but we're altering the environment, which alters the food, right? So that's what we need to understand is that the fix is not the food. The fix is in the environment. And it may seem like semantics, but that goes way beyond what we spray on crops. All right, that goes into how we create energy and what those chemicals are made out of, right? So you look at something like Roundup, that has a petroleum base. I hope everybody knows that. So if you don't think, and another interesting thing is go look at how Monsanto just changed their name because people don't like Monsanto, so they cleverly are changing their name. But that is a petroleum-based product. So if that's the case, petroleum's a big money market. I'm not like going on this energy rant of get rid of all oil. Like it's not going to happen quick, and I don't even know if it needs to happen completely, to be honest. We just need to be smarter and start thinking about things differently. And at the end of the day, sometimes semantics do matter because just like if you were told that you're worthless over and over as a kid, and we talked about this, the thought of epigenetics and the manifestation of, how genes are going to turn on, turn off, if you want to call it that. If you tell yourself all the time that it's, I do better when I don't eat gluten. I need to cut my calories. The things you tell yourself end up mattering. That's why make sure you're telling yourself things that are based on the truth and not just kind of ideologies that were built by somebody that was selling a book or an idea or a DVD or a documentary, whatever it is. And that's hard to do. That's why I really try. I know I throw a lot of stuff out that people don't agree with, and I really don't give a shit if you don't agree with me. Because my goal is not to have people that agree with me comment on these things, come on my show. It's the fact that I can continually learn, hopefully try to remove my biases on things that I held as truth, and eventually maybe you distill it down. You're like, oh, that is the truth. A lot of stuff we just don't know. But my goal on this show is just put information out there. I would love somebody come on here and be like, dude, these 3 things that you talked about are all wrong. Okay, well, tell me why. Now I know. Now I'm better for knowing. Now I got to create action on that knowing. And that's the process that's not happening in a lot of areas in our everyday life now. So if I can just help people know, I can't help you take action. I don't think I can. Maybe education catalyzes something for somebody, which that's going to be the blog next week. I'm going to talk about accelerants and extinguishers for basically progress, in a lot of areas in your life. So look for that next week. I'm going to start wrapping up here. Who do we have coming on in the next few weeks? So let me look at the calendar here, guys. So we got the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Roberts. Jeff is a wealth management guru. I don't know if he would even appreciate the guru term. He's a stud, though. He's going to be on. We'll probably have him on in early July. That'll drop. We also have Justin Overton, who is the director for the Coosa Riverkeeper here. She's also a yoga instructor, so that'll be a very interesting talk about water quality from all levels of the environment, as well as kind of yoga and some wellness. And then we got Dr. Snell, who I talked about earlier. He's coming on in later July. Keep sending your questions in, and if you have any guest suggestions or somebody you'd like to be on yourself, hit me with a DM, and I'd love to try to accommodate. I appreciate you guys joining me for this kind of just, musing of my ideas and a solo cast, and keep sending those Q&A ins, and we'll see you next time, guys.